The weight of the decision pressed heavily on Sarah's chest as she sat in the quiet of their living room. The same room where, just a few years ago, she had sat beside Jack, dreaming of a future filled with hope and possibility. Now, that hope seemed like a distant memory, replaced by the cold reality of a marriage slowly crumbling under the weight of selfishness and neglect. Sarah ran a hand through her dark hair, her fingers trembling slightly as the weight of her thoughts took over. Her gaze drifted to the framed photo on the mantel, a picture of her, Jack, and their son Ben, taken at their wedding day. It was supposed to be a symbol of their love, a moment frozen in time when they both believed in forever. But looking at the picture now, it felt like a lie. Jack had never truly understood what it meant to be a partner. For years, Sarah had carried the financial burden of their family, covering the rent for their luxurious apartment, $4,000 a month, money that never seemed to stretch far enough. She had worked hard to get where she was, a respected researcher at a top-tier company, and yet it felt as though all of her success had been overshadowed by Jack's refusal to face reality. Her heart ached as she thought of the sacrifices she had made for him. Jack had always been the dreamer, the one who refused to grow up, clinging to the hope of becoming a famous musician. She had admired his passion once, encouraged him to chase his dreams. But that was before they had been, before their life together had to become more than just dreams and promises. Sarah had always been the practical one, the realist. But Jack? Jack remained lost in his world of music, avoiding responsibility at every turn. "I can't do this anymore," Sarah whispered to herself, the words hanging in the air like a final declaration. She had given him chances, so many chances. She had begged him to take on a steady job, to contribute to their shared life. But instead, he chose to play in bars, strumming his guitar for a handful of strangers, chasing a dream that seemed more and more out of reach with each passing year. The financial strain was unbearable. She had been patient, understanding even when he dismissed her concerns as nagging. But now, after years of shouldering the burden alone, she was done. Done pretending that everything was fine. Done pretending that their life together could somehow get better. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. She glanced at the screen. Jack. It had been days since their last conversation, and things had only gotten worse. She had told him then, firmly, that she needed him to leave. But he had shrugged it off, too casual, too dismissive. His response still stung in her memory. "Fine. I'll be out tonight and back tomorrow evening. Just make sure you're gone by then." Her stomach turned at the arrogance in his voice. He thought he could just dictate the terms of their life, as though she was the one holding him back. But Sarah had made up her mind. She had spent weeks planning for this moment, weeks preparing herself for what came next. It wasn't just about leaving. It was about taking back control of her life. She had been patient, understanding, supportive, but she wasn't going to let Jack continue to drag her down. She wasn't going to let him ruin her future any longer. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, and Ben appeared in the doorway, his eyes wide with concern. "Mom, are you okay?" Ben asked softly, his voice filled with uncertainty. Sarah smiled faintly, trying to mask the pain she felt. "I'm fine, honey," she said, her voice steady despite the storm swirling inside her. "Just thinking." Ben stepped into the room, his small frame towering over her as he took a seat beside her on the couch. He was 12 now, not a little boy anymore. He had grown up too fast, especially in the past few years, as he witnessed the slow unraveling of his parents' marriage. Ben's eyes flickered to the photo on the mantel. "Is it really over, Mom?" he asked quietly, his voice trembling slightly. "Are you really going to make him leave?" Sarah's heart broke as she looked at her son, his innocent face so full of confusion and sadness. Ben had always been the one to feel the tension between her and Jack, even when they tried to shield him from it. "Yes, Ben," Sarah replied, her voice firm but full of emotion. "It's over." Ben didn't say anything for a long moment. Instead, he just hugged her tightly, burying his face in her shoulder. It was a gesture that made Sarah want to cry, made her wish more than anything that she could shield him from the pain. "I'll help you pack, Mom," Ben said, his voice muffled as he pulled away slightly. "We'll be okay, right?" Sarah nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "We'll be okay, Ben. We're going to be just fine." As they sat there in silence, the reality of what she was about to do settled in. She was going to move on, for herself, for Ben. She wasn't going to let Jack's selfishness define her anymore. She wasn't going to wait for him to change. She was going to take control of her own life. A few hours later, the door slammed shut, and Jack was gone. Sarah stood at the window, watching him drive away. It wasn't the first time he had left, but this time felt different. This time, she knew it was for good. She turned to Ben, her voice barely a whisper. "We're starting fresh now." Ben smiled faintly, as if he understood, and together they began to pack up their things. As Sarah sorted through boxes, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message from her friend, Alice. Alice was someone Sarah had met through work, a no-nonsense woman who had always been there for her, especially during the tough times with Jack. "Hey, Sarah, do you need help with anything? You don't have to do this alone." Sarah quickly replied, "I'll be fine, Alice. Thanks for checking in." She felt a slight pang of guilt, knowing Alice had offered to help her through the divorce process. But Sarah had always been the independent type, and she didn't want to burden her friends with her personal problems. Still, Alice's support meant everything to her. Just then, the doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Sarah froze. She knew it couldn't be Jack. He wasn't supposed to return until the next day, after all. She opened the door to find Emma, her older sister, standing on the porch. Emma's face was filled with concern, her eyes scanning Sarah's face for any sign of distress. "Sarah, you okay?" Emma asked gently, her voice warm and comforting. "I'm fine," Sarah replied, her lips curving into a tired smile. "Just packing up." Emma stepped inside, her eyes immediately taking in the scene, boxes everywhere, the house feeling emptier with each passing minute. "I thought I'd come by, see if you needed help," Emma said, her tone soft but insistent. "You're not doing this all on your own, are you?" Sarah shook her head, feeling a lump form in her throat again. She hadn't realized how much she needed Emma's presence until now. "I appreciate it, Emma," Sarah said, her voice cracking. I don't know how I let things get this bad." Emma wrapped her arms around Sarah, pulling her into a hug. "It's not your fault," she said. "But now, you're free. You and Ben are free." Sarah couldn't help but let out a relieved breath, finally allowing herself to feel the weight lift off her shoulders. She wasn't alone anymore. She had Emma, she had Ben, and now she could start rebuilding her life. The hours passed in a blur as they packed up what was left of their life in that apartment. Ben helped, occasionally breaking the tension with a joke or a light-hearted comment. But there was a heaviness in the air, a sense of finality that neither Sarah nor Emma could shake off. Finally, as the sun began to set, Sarah and Ben stood in the living room, surrounded by packed boxes. They had done it. They were done. Jack was gone. "It's over," Sarah whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Emma gave her a small, reassuring smile. "It's just the beginning, Sarah. The beginning of something new." Sarah sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the packed boxes surrounding her. Ben had gone to bed, exhausted from the day's events. It had been a long day, one that felt like it lasted an eternity. The house was eerily quiet now, the silence echoing the emptiness she felt inside. She had spent so many years living with the constant tension of Jack's irresponsibility, but now, the weight of the final decision settled in her chest, a painful but necessary relief. She had made her choice, but that didn't make it any easier. For years, she had tried to keep the peace, to make their family work. But now, the dream of a happy marriage had shattered into 1,000 pieces, each piece sharper than the last. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of a knock on the door. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Who could it be at this hour? She hadn't expected anyone. Hesitating for a moment, she got up, wiping her hands on her jeans before heading toward the door. When she opened it, she was met with the sight of her mother, Carol, standing in the doorway, her face pale with concern. "Sarah, sweetheart," Carol said softly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "I had a feeling you'd need me." Sarah could feel the tears welling up in her eyes. She didn't want to cry in front of her mother, but the dam inside her was finally breaking. "Mom, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm so tired. I don't want to fight anymore. I can't live like this," Sarah confessed, her voice trembling. Carol wrapped her arms around her daughter, pulling her into a tight embrace. "You don't have to keep living like this, sweetheart. You're not alone. You've always had us, and we'll help you get through this." Sarah let out a sob, the tears flowing freely now. "I thought I could fix it. I thought I could make it work, but he's not going to change. He never has, and he never will." Carol stroked Sarah's hair gently, offering the kind of comfort only a mother could give. "You've done enough, honey. You can't carry the weight of his dreams and your own. It's time to let go." Sarah pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes. "I'm scared, Mom. I'm scared of starting over, of doing this without him. But I'm more scared of staying in a marriage where I'm constantly second to his dreams. I'm scared of losing myself." Carol smiled softly, her eyes filled with understanding. "I know, sweetheart. It's scary. But sometimes, the hardest thing to do is the right thing. You've got to put yourself and Ben first. You deserve to live a life where you're valued, where you're not always giving and getting nothing in return." Sarah nodded, the weight of her decision starting to settle more comfortably in her heart. "I'm doing this, Mom. I'm finally doing this." With her mother's support, Sarah felt a sense of clarity she hadn't felt in years. As the hours ticked by, she found herself pacing, her mind racing through 1,000 thoughts. The house was almost empty, the last remnants of their life together packed into boxes and bags. She glanced at her phone, noticing a new message from Emma. "Hey, Sarah. If you need anything, I'm here. Don't hesitate to call." Sarah smiled faintly, grateful for her friend's constant support. Emma had been there through it all, through the tears, the arguments, and the quiet moments of hopelessness. She was a lifeline that Sarah had clung to for years, even if she had never fully let her in on the true extent of the strain in her marriage. She thought about calling Emma, but then her phone rang. Sarah stared at the screen. It was Jack. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should answer. But deep down, she knew the conversation wouldn't bring any peace. She let the phone ring through. The voicemail beeped, and she listened as Jack's voice filled the room. "Sarah, I don't know what's going on, but this isn't how things are supposed to end. I know you're angry, but I'm trying. I really am. Just don't shut me out." Sarah took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the phone. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him that his trying was never enough. But instead, she pressed the button to end the call. She was done with the excuses. She was done with the empty promises. It was time for both of them to face reality. As the night wore on, Sarah felt a sense of resolution settle over her. She was done waiting for Jack to change, done waiting for a man who didn't care enough to change for his family. The next morning, she was up early, packing the last of the boxes and arranging everything for the movers. Ben had gone to his friend Noah's house for the day, and Sarah was grateful for the quiet. She didn't want him to see her struggle, didn't want him to feel the weight of what she was about to do. She had always tried to shield Ben from the ugliness in their relationship, but now it was time for him to know the truth. She could no longer protect him from the reality of their life. As she finished packing, the doorbell rang. She opened the door to find 2 movers, waiting with a clipboard and a truck ready to be loaded. "Morning, ma'am," one of the movers said politely. "We're here to help with the move." Sarah nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice steady despite the rush of emotions she was feeling. She led them into the living room, watching as they began to carefully load the boxes into the truck. It felt surreal, as if she were watching someone else's life unfold before her eyes. As the movers worked, Sarah found herself staring out the window, lost in thought. She hadn't heard from Jack, and part of her wondered if he was truly gone this time. Was he going to fight for their marriage? Or had he finally given up? The thought of him coming back to try and change her mind made her feel sick to her stomach. She wasn't going to fall for it again. "Ma'am, everything's packed up," one of the movers called, snapping Sarah out of her reverie. She nodded and handed him the payment, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over her. "Thank you," she said again, this time with a little more strength in her voice. As the movers left, Sarah took one last look around the empty apartment. She could still see the traces of their life together, the faint outline of where the couch had been, the spot where Ben's toys had once scattered across the floor. But now it was all gone. The apartment, the memories, the life they had tried to build. It was time to let it all go. With one final glance, Sarah locked the door behind her, knowing that she was closing the door to a chapter of her life she would never revisit. It was done. She was done. And for the first time in years, Sarah felt a sense of freedom, a freedom she hadn't known she was capable of. She was ready to start fresh. As she stepped into the moving truck with Ben by her side, she knew that the road ahead would be hard. But it would be her road. It would be their road. Together, they would face whatever came next. And maybe, just maybe, they would find happiness along the way. It had been a few weeks since Sarah and Ben moved into their new apartment. The transition wasn't easy, but they had made it work. The apartment was small, certainly not luxurious like the place they had left behind, but it was theirs. It was a fresh start, and for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a sense of peace. Her life was slowly coming together, despite the aftermath of the divorce. Ben had settled in well, making new friends at his school, but Sarah could see the sadness lingering in his eyes. He missed his father, and Sarah couldn't blame him. Even though Jack had been distant and irresponsible, he was still Ben's father, and that bond was hard to sever, no matter how much she had to protect them both from the mess Jack had created. Sarah spent the days unpacking and organizing their new home. It wasn't much, but it was a sanctuary. The thought of going back to that luxurious apartment, where so many painful memories were made, was unbearable. She found solace in the quiet moments with Ben, taking comfort in the small victories, getting the bills paid on time, making sure Ben's lunch was packed for school, and even managing to sneak in a bit of time for herself. The first time she had a full day without worrying about Jack, about the constant strain of their marriage, Sarah felt a deep relief. But, as with everything in life, peace never lasted long. One afternoon, as Sarah sat in her small kitchen, sipping her coffee and reading through some work emails, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Emma. "How are you holding up? Need anything? I'm free for dinner tonight if you want to talk." Sarah smiled at the message. Emma had been a constant support, someone she could vent to without judgment. She quickly typed back, "I'm good, just busy settling in. But dinner sounds great tonight. We need a catch-up." Emma's response came quickly. "Great! I'll pick you up at 7. Be ready!" As the evening rolled in, Sarah felt a wave of exhaustion hit her. She had been going nonstop for weeks, trying to juggle the logistics of their new life while keeping up with her job. The thought of spending a few hours with Emma, talking about something other than her life's recent chaos, was a welcome escape. At 7 p.m. sharp, Emma arrived at Sarah's door, a bright smile on her face and a bottle of wine in hand. "I brought the wine. Figured we could toast to new beginnings," Emma said as she stepped inside. Sarah couldn't help but laugh. Emma had always known how to lighten the mood. "You know me too well," Sarah replied, gesturing for her to sit. "I need something to help me unwind." They settled down on the couch, glasses of wine in hand, as Sarah recounted the last few weeks, unpacking, finding new routines, and adjusting to the reality of being a single mother. "It's been hard, you know," Sarah admitted, her voice quieter now. "Ben's doing well at school, but I see how much he misses Jack. And I miss the old him too, the one who was hopeful and full of ambition, not the one who turned into someone I didn't recognize." Emma's expression softened, and she reached over, squeezing Sarah's hand. I can't imagine how difficult it must be for both of you. But you're doing the right thing, Sarah. You're not just doing this for you, you're doing it for Ben, too. He deserves to see his mother strong, independent, and happy again. Sarah nodded, the weight of Emma's words settling deep within her. I keep telling myself that. I know it's the right thing. But the guilt, it's overwhelming at times, especially when I see Ben's face. Emma took a long sip of her wine before setting the glass down on the coffee table. Ben will be okay. He'll understand when he's older. What matters now is that you're building a future for both of you. You've given Jack enough chances. You've done everything you could. Sarah looked at Emma, grateful for the unwavering support. I don't know what I would have done without you, she said softly. Emma smiled warmly. That's what friends are for. They spent the next few hours talking about everything and nothing. Emma's latest dating mishap, Sarah's work challenges, and even reminiscing about their college days. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah didn't think about Jack, didn't feel the heavy burden of guilt or sadness. She felt light, as if she were reconnecting with the woman she had lost along the way. As the night wound down, Emma glanced at her watch. It's getting late. You sure you're okay to handle everything tomorrow? I can help you out, you know. Sarah smiled, feeling a renewed sense of strength. I've got it, Emma. Thank you, but I'm finally ready to take control. The next few days passed by in a blur of work, school, and life's usual demands. Ben seemed to adjust well, but Sarah couldn't ignore the occasional phone call or text from Jack. He hadn't given up on trying to win her back, and it was starting to wear on Sarah. She had always been the one who kept their family together, but now she was learning to let go. One evening, after putting Ben to bed, Sarah sat down on the couch with a glass of wine, staring at her phone. She had been avoiding Jack's calls, but tonight she decided it was time to face him. She dialed his number, her heart racing as it rang. When Jack finally picked up, his voice was strained, almost desperate. Sarah, he began, I've been thinking about everything. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I'll change. I'll be different. Just give me another chance. Sarah's grip tightened around her glass, her emotions bubbling to the surface. Jack, I'm done. You've had all the chances. I can't keep living in this endless cycle of disappointment. You're not the man I married, and I'm not the woman who is going to keep enabling your selfishness. There was silence on the other end, and for a moment, Sarah thought he might hang up. But Jack's voice came back, quieter now. I thought we had something special, Sarah. I thought we could get through anything together. We did, Jack, Sarah said, her voice steady. But that was before you stopped caring about this family. That was before you stopped trying. I've given you everything I had, and now I need to give something to myself. She paused, the weight of her words sinking in. It's over. I'm moving on, and I'm asking you to do the same. The line went silent, and Sarah felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. She had finally made the break. The emotional weight that had burdened her for so long seemed to lift, and for the first time in years, she could breathe. That night, Sarah stood in the kitchen, looking out the window at the city lights in the distance. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she saw the future clearly. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was hers to walk. She wasn't going to let fear control her anymore. She wasn't going to be held back by Jack's broken promises or his inability to change. She was going to build a life for her and Ben, a life that was stable, fulfilling, and free of the chaos Jack had brought. As Sarah walked toward Ben's room, she felt a quiet determination take root in her heart. This was just the beginning. They were going to be okay. It had been a few months since Sarah made the bold decision to leave Jack and start over. Her life had settled into a quiet routine: work, taking care of Ben, and managing their small apartment. Sarah had found herself growing stronger each day, more confident in the choices she had made. The weight of the constant worry and stress that Jack had brought into their lives was finally lifting, and she had started to rediscover who she was, outside of the roles of wife and mother. She had joined a local yoga class to help with the stress, and although it wasn't much, It was a small step toward regaining the sense of self she had lost during her marriage. Ben was adjusting too. He had become more comfortable at school, and while he still missed his father, he no longer seemed as burdened by the tension that had once plagued their home. They had their routine, Sarah making breakfast every morning while Ben packed his school bag, and they would sit down together to talk about their day before he went off to school. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. There were still moments when Sarah would catch herself thinking about Jack, wondering how he was coping with the changes, wondering if he had truly learned anything from their divorce. But she had stopped answering his calls, stopped checking his messages. Every time she saw his name flash on her phone, she felt a wave of frustration and sadness wash over her. She had been patient with him for years, and now it was her turn to take care of herself. One evening, as she was preparing dinner for herself and Ben, the doorbell rang. At first, she thought it was just a delivery, maybe groceries or a package. But when she opened the door, her heart dropped. It was Jack, standing in front of her, looking like a shell of the man she had married, with a half-hearted attempt at a smile. "Sarah," he said, his voice softer than she remembered. "Can we talk?" Sarah felt her stomach tighten. She hadn't seen him in months, and the fact that he was standing there, asking to talk, sent a rush of emotions through her. She had worked so hard to build a life without him, and now he was standing here, trying to break through the walls she had so carefully built. She glanced over her shoulder to check on Ben, who was in his room, likely lost in his homework. Sarah stepped aside, allowing Jack to enter. "You have 5 minutes," she said, her voice firm but controlled. Jack nodded and stepped inside, looking around the small apartment with a quiet sense of regret in his eyes. He seemed different somehow, smaller, more fragile. He had always been the one to act like he had everything under control, but now Sarah could see the cracks. I don't know where to start," Jack began, his voice strained. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Sarah, and I know I screwed up. I know I wasn't there when you needed me, and I know I wasn't the man you deserved. I was selfish, but I'm trying to change. I really am. I want a chance to make things right." Sarah stared at him, her emotions swirling. For a moment, she wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that Jack had truly changed. But deep down, she knew better. She had given him chance after chance, and each time, he had failed to step up. She wasn't going to let her hopes get the best of her again. "Jack," Sarah said, her voice quiet but steady. "I don't know what you expect from me. I've spent years trying to make this work, trying to hold everything together. But you weren't willing to change. You never were. And now, I can't keep carrying this burden." Jack's eyes flickered with frustration. "I'm not asking you to carry it, Sarah. I'm asking you to let me help. I'm asking you to let me be a part of Ben's life again. I want to be a better father, a better man. I've hit rock bottom, and I don't want to stay there." Sarah took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to be strong, for herself, for Ben. She had made a life for them both, and she wasn't about to let Jack's empty promises tear that apart. "You're too late," she said softly, her eyes not leaving his. "You had your chance, Jack, and you wasted it." There was a long silence between them, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Jack shifted uncomfortably, his face hardening. "So that's it then?" he asked, his voice sharp. "You're just done? You're really going to cut me out of Ben's life?" Sarah nodded, feeling a strange sense of peace wash over her. "Yes, I'm done. And so is Ben. You're not the man he needs, and you're not the man I need either." Jack stood there for a moment, the reality of her words sinking in, his face flushed with anger, but there was a tremor in his voice as he spoke again. "You'll regret this, Sarah. You'll see." Sarah didn't flinch. "No, Jack, I won't." She turned to walk away, but Jack called out to her, his voice filled with a mix of frustration and desperation. "You don't get it, do you? I'm not the only one who's changed. You have too. You're not the woman I married anymore." The words stung more than Sarah cared to admit, But she didn't let them show. She paused and turned back to him, her eyes cold. You're right. I'm not the same woman. I'm stronger now. And I'm not going to let you pull me back into your mess. Jack looked at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and resentment. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for you to throw everything away. Sarah shook her head. No, Jack, you didn't. But you made your choices. And now I'm making mine. With that, Sarah closed the door behind her, leaving Jack standing in the hallway, his voice fading as he muttered something under his breath. She didn't care. She was done. When Sarah returned to the kitchen, she found Ben standing there, watching her silently. He had heard everything. His eyes were filled with a mix of confusion and concern. Mom, are you okay? He asked softly, his voice hesitant. Sarah smiled, her heart heavy but full of resolve. Yes, Ben, she said, her voice steady. I'm okay. Ben walked over to her, wrapping his arms around her in a tight hug. I'm glad, he said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. I don't want you to be sad anymore. Sarah held him close, feeling a surge of love and protection for her son. I won't be, honey, I promise. She pulled back slightly, wiping a stray tear from her cheek. We're going to be okay, Ben. We're going to be better than okay. We've got each other. Nar. Ben smiled, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah believed it. They would be okay. It had been 6 months since Sarah's final decision to sever ties with Jack. She had built a life for herself and Ben, one that was stable, grounded, and, most importantly, peaceful. The weight of the past was still there, lingering in the back of her mind, but it was becoming easier to let go of the anger and frustration that had once consumed her. Ben was thriving at school. He had joined the soccer team, made new friends, and was beginning to smile more often. Sarah watched him, filled with pride, knowing that he was no longer carrying the burden of his father's neglect. But there were moments, small and fleeting, when Sarah found herself wondering about Jack. He had gone quiet after their confrontation. She had received a few more messages and voicemails, each more desperate than the last, but she had ignored them all. She had moved on, but part of her couldn't help but wonder if Jack had changed. And if he had, was it too late? One Tuesday evening, as Sarah was preparing dinner for herself and Ben, the doorbell rang again. Her heart skipped a beat. She hadn't heard from Jack in over a month, and yet there he was, standing at her doorstep once more. His eyes were tired, his posture slouched, and he looked different, vulnerable even. He hadn't been this way the last time she saw him. That thought alone made Sarah pause, unsure of how to respond. Sarah. Jack's voice was quieter now, more measured than it had been in the past. I need to talk to you. I know I've messed up, but I've been working on myself. I just want a chance to make things right with you and Ben. Sarah's pulse quickened. The man in front of her seemed like a stranger. It was as if he had come from a different universe, one where responsibility and maturity had found their way into his life. She hesitated, the memories of their past flashing in her mind. Was this really change? Could it be possible that after all this time, Jack was genuinely different? Jack, she said slowly, her voice steady, but her heart was conflicted. You've had chances. Too many chances. You've had years to show me you were capable of change, but every time you let me down. Let us down. Jack's face crumpled at the words, but he pushed forward. I know, and I'll never be able to undo what I did. But I need you to understand that I'm different now. I'm not the same person who walked away from this family. I've been working on myself. I've been going to therapy, I've cut back on the drinking, and I've been focusing on getting a real job. I'm serious about making things right. Sarah looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. For a moment, she almost wanted to believe him. But then she remembered all the times she had believed him before, all those promises, she thought, that always turned out to be empty. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Ben's voice from the other room. Mom, who's at the door? He appeared in the hallway, standing in the doorway, his expression one of curiosity. Jack's eyes met Ben's, and for a brief moment, Sarah saw the man he used to be, the father who had once promised to be there for his son. But that man was gone, replaced by the stranger standing on her doorstep. Ben, Sarah said softly, her voice shaking slightly as she spoke, you don't have to be here for this. Ben didn't move. Instead, he stepped closer to the door, his gaze fixed on Jack. Dad? He asked, the word hanging in the air like a question neither of them knew how to answer. Jack took a step forward, his voice breaking as he spoke. Ben, I've been a bad father. I know that, and I'm sorry. I want to make it right. I want to be there for you, if you'll let me. Ben's expression remained unreadable, his eyes darting between his mother and father. He was confused, hurt, and unsure of how to respond. You were never really there for me, Ben said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. You just left, without any explanation. Jack's face fell, and for the first time in a long while, Sarah saw the guilt written across his face. But the guilt didn't matter anymore. It was too late. Sarah stepped forward, her heart heavy. Ben, she said, her voice firm, you don't have to listen to any more of this. I've got you. You're safe, and we're okay. We're more than okay. Ben nodded, his eyes welling with tears, but he didn't say anything more. He turned and walked back to his room, leaving Sarah and Jack standing there, alone in the hallway. Jack looked down, his shoulders slumped as though the weight of his failures was finally crushing him. Sarah, I'm sorry. I know I can't change the past, but I want to be part of Ben's life. I want to fix this. Please, just give me a chance. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to gather her thoughts. She had spent so long waiting for Jack to change, for him to take responsibility. But now it was clear that the man standing before her wasn't the man she had once loved. He was a broken man, desperate to fix what he had destroyed, but she had already rebuilt her life without him. Jack, she said softly, you can't fix this. You can't fix the past. And you can't be part of Ben's life just because you say you're sorry. It doesn't work like that. She paused, her voice breaking slightly. I've spent so many years waiting for you to be the man I needed. And now I have to let go. For both of us. Jack's face twisted with pain, but he didn't argue. He didn't fight for her the way she had hoped he would. He just stood there, defeated. I understand, he said quietly. I guess I never understood how much I had until it was gone. Sarah nodded, her heart aching for the man he used to be, but resolute in her decision. I'll always care about you, Jack, but I can't keep living in the past. I can't keep waiting for someone who isn't coming back. She turned and walked away, closing the door behind her. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt a sense of peace settle over her. It was the final closure she needed. Jack was a part of her past now, but he was no longer the man she had to fight for. The door to her new life was wide open, and she was finally free to walk through it. As Sarah stood in the kitchen, looking out the window at the city skyline, she knew that this was the moment everything changed. She wasn't going back. This was her life now, and she was ready to live it fully. She was no longer the woman who had waited. She was the woman who had moved forward. And in that moment, Sarah realized that she had finally found the strength to embrace the future, to embrace her freedom. She was free. It had been a month since Sarah's final confrontation with Jack. Her life had taken a new direction, one she had not anticipated. She had truly started to let go of the past, the anger, the hurt, the uncertainty. The nights that had once been filled with anxiety were now peaceful, and even though the quietness of the apartment sometimes felt overwhelming, Sarah had learned to embrace it. Ben was thriving. He had made new friends, joined a local soccer league, and was doing well in school. She watched him play in the park one afternoon, his smile brighter than it had been in months. It was clear that he was healing. Sarah had been doing well too, though it had not been easy. She spent her days working and her nights alone, still trying to figure out who she was, without the constant tension of her marriage. She had moments of doubt, of questioning whether she had made the right decision, if Ben would grow up to resent her for ending the family. But each time those thoughts crept in, she reminded herself why she had done it. She wasn't just leaving Jack. She was leaving behind a life that had been draining her, emotionally and mentally. She was moving towards something better, something her son deserved, something she deserved. One Thursday afternoon, Sarah found herself sitting in the small coffee shop down the street from her office. She had been coming here on and off for the past few weeks, mostly to get away from the office and clear her mind. As she sat there sipping her coffee, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Emma. "Hey, how's the week been? Want to grab dinner tonight?" Sarah smiled at the message. She and Emma had become closer since the divorce, their bond growing stronger with each passing week. Emma had been a constant source of support, someone Sarah could confide in when things felt overwhelming. "Dinner sounds great. I'm in," Emma replied almost instantly. "Pick you up at 7. Be ready to vent." Sarah chuckled to herself as she set her phone down. It had been a while since she had taken time for herself, and the thought of spending a few hours with Emma, talking about anything but Jack or Ben, was exactly what she needed. As she gathered her things to leave, she glanced up and locked eyes with someone across the room. It was someone she hadn't expected to see. Jack. Her heart skipped a beat, and for a brief moment, everything around her seemed to stop. Jack was sitting alone at a table near the window, looking at her with a mixture of hesitation and hope. She hadn't seen him in weeks, and seeing him now, out of nowhere, caught her off guard. She had been doing so well without him, finally finding her balance, and now, here he was again, standing right in front of her. Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. She had worked so hard to let go of the past, to build a life that didn't involve him, and now he was here, testing her resolve. She could feel her pulse quicken, her thoughts racing. She didn't know what to do. Should she approach him? Should she ignore him? He had never really understood boundaries, always showing up when it was most inconvenient, when she least expected it. Before she could make a decision, Jack stood up and walked toward her. His face was soft, vulnerable, a stark contrast to the man he had been months ago. "Sarah," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "Can we talk?" The words hit her like a wave. The anger she had been holding on to for so long seemed to fade, replaced by a weariness she had long suppressed. She wasn't angry anymore. She was tired. Tired of the same cycle. Tired of hoping that things would change when they never did. She didn't know what to say, but the words came out of her mouth before she could stop them. "Why are you here, Jack?" she asked, her voice a mixture of curiosity and frustration. Jack hesitated for a moment, as though gathering the courage to speak. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want to make things right, for Ben. And for you. I know I can't undo the damage I've caused, but I need to try. I need you to know I'm not the same man I was." Sarah studied him for a long moment, her gaze unwavering. He looked different. He seemed smaller, broken in a way that was almost unrecognizable. For a moment, Sarah thought about everything they had been through, the years of disappointment, the empty promises. But then she thought about Ben, and how much he had already suffered because of Jack's behavior. She thought about the life she had started to rebuild, the life she had built without him. She thought about the promise she had made to herself, to never let herself be that woman again. "Jack, I don't know what you expect from me," Sarah said softly, shaking her head. "But I've moved on. I've spent too many years hoping you'd change, waiting for you to be the man I needed you to be. And now, I'm not that woman anymore. I've let go." Jack's eyes filled with regret, his lips trembling slightly as he fought to find the right words. "I know I'm too late, Sarah. I know I messed up. But I can't walk away without trying. I want to be a father to Ben. I want to be there for him, to make up for the time I've wasted." Sarah looked at him, her heart aching. She could see how much he wanted to believe that he could make things right, but she also knew that the damage had been done. It wasn't just about Jack anymore. It was about her and Ben. "Jack!" Sarah said, her voice steady but firm. You can't fix this. You can't fix the past. You can't just waltz back in and expect everything to be okay. Jack's face fell, and for a moment, he looked defeated. So that's it? You're just cutting me out of your life? Cutting me out of Ben's life? Sarah nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of her decision. Yes, I'm cutting you out. I've made peace with the fact that you're not the man I married. You've been given enough chances, but I can't keep holding on to something that's never going to be. There was silence between them, and Jack took a deep breath, as though preparing himself for the final blow. I understand, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Sarah looked at him for a moment, her heart torn. But she knew, deep down, that this was the only way forward. Goodbye, Jack, she said, her voice breaking as she turned to walk away. As Sarah left the coffee shop, she felt the weight of the past years lifting off her shoulders. She had finally made the break. It wasn't easy, it wasn't perfect, but it was the right thing to do. She wasn't the same woman who had been dragged down by Jack's inaction and neglect. She was stronger now. She was free. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she could breathe again. It had been almost a year since Sarah had made the decision to leave Jack, a year that had been filled with countless challenges, growth, and healing. The journey had not been easy, but she had made it through, and with each passing day, she had become more confident in her choices, more certain of the path she had chosen. Ben had grown into a bright, confident young teenager, his eyes no longer clouded with the confusion and sadness that had once plagued him. Sarah watched him at the breakfast table one morning, his face lighting up as he spoke about a school project, excited about a new topic he had chosen to research. For the first time in a long time, she saw him as the happy, carefree boy he was meant to be. He was finally free from the weight of the past. Sarah had done what she had set out to do. She had built a life that was healthy, stable, and, most importantly, full of love. She had her job, her small but cozy apartment, and most importantly, her son. She had learned to take time for herself, something she had neglected for so long. Yoga had become a part of her routine, and she had joined a local book club, meeting new people and discovering new passions. She had started making her own decisions, taking back the power she had lost in her marriage. But there were still moments when the quiet of the apartment would make her feel the weight of solitude. She had become used to being alone, but sometimes, as she sat by herself at night, she wondered if she would ever feel truly whole again. As the days went by, she found herself looking out the window, watching the world go by, and wondering if love was something she could ever believe in again. She had been through so much with Jack, and even though she had finally let go, there was a part of her that still feared opening her heart to anyone else. One evening, after a long day at work, Sarah sat on her couch with a cup of tea, her mind racing through the events of the past year. It had been a year of transformation for her, physically, emotionally, and mentally. But as she sat there, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that there was something more waiting for her. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. She wasn't expecting anyone, so she hesitated for a moment, wondering who it could be. When she opened the door, her heart skipped a beat. Standing on the other side was Emma, her face flushed with excitement. "Sarah, I need to talk to you," Emma said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Sarah raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. "What's going on, Emma?" "I think I've found something you're going to love," Emma said, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "What?" Sarah asked, a little confused. Emma pulled a piece of paper from her purse and handed it to Sarah. It was a flyer for a local art exhibit, a collection of pieces from local artists. "I know you've been wanting to try something new, something different," Emma said, grinning. "So," I thought, "why not step out of your comfort zone and go to this exhibit with me?" Sarah looked at the flyer, unsure. She had never really considered art as a hobby, but Emma was right. She had been craving something new, something that would push her to experience life in a different way. "I don't know," Sarah began, but Emma cut her off. "Come on, Sarah. When was the last time you did something just for you? You're always working so hard, always focused on Ben. This is your chance to do something for yourself." Sarah hesitated for a moment longer, then looked at Emma's excited face and realized she was right. She had spent so much time focusing on everyone else that she had forgotten what it felt like to truly indulge in something just for herself. "All right, let's do it," Sarah said, smiling for the first time that day. "I'll go." Emma let out a triumphant laugh and pulled Sarah into a hug. "I knew you'd come around. I promise you, it's going to be fun." The night of the exhibit arrived, and Sarah found herself standing in front of a small gallery in the heart of the city. The lights were dim, and the walls were lined with paintings, sculptures, and photographs. She could feel her pulse quicken as she stepped inside, the atmosphere charged with creativity and possibility. Emma was already inside, chatting animatedly with a few other people from the book club. Sarah lingered near the entrance, feeling out of place, unsure of what to do next. But as she walked deeper into the gallery, something unexpected happened. She began to feel a sense of awe and wonder, as though she had stepped into a completely different world. The paintings on the walls were vibrant and full of life, each piece telling a story of its own. She found herself drawn to one in particular, a beautiful portrait of a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, gazing out over the ocean. The colors were so vivid, and the expression on the woman's face was one of quiet strength. Sarah felt a deep connection to it, as though the artist had captured something inside her, something she had longed to find. Emma noticed her standing in front of the painting and came over with a smile. "I thought I'd find you here," she said. "This one speaks to me," Sarah replied, her voice filled with emotion. "It's like she's standing at the edge of something new, ready to take a leap." "That's the artist's intention," Emma said knowingly. "It's about embracing change, embracing the unknown." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of those words settle in her chest. She had been standing at the edge of something new for so long, uncertain of what the future held, but knowing that she had to take that leap. "I think I'm ready," Sarah said softly, more to herself than to Emma. "Ready for what?" Emma asked, her eyes soft with understanding. "Ready to take the leap," Sarah said, her voice steady with conviction. "Ready to embrace what's next, whatever that might be." Emma smiled, her eyes lighting up with pride. "I'm so proud of you, Sarah. You've come so far." The rest of the evening was a blur of art, conversation, and laughter. Sarah felt lighter than she had in months, as though the weight of her past had finally been lifted. She had stepped out of her comfort zone, and it had been exactly what she needed. As they left the gallery later that night, Emma turned to Sarah with a knowing smile. "See? That wasn't so bad, was it?" "No," Sarah replied, her voice filled with gratitude. "It was exactly what I needed." As they walked into the cool night air, Sarah realized that she had taken her first step into the future. She was no longer weighed down by the past, no longer living in the shadows of what could have been. She was finally free, ready to embrace whatever life had in store for her. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt truly alive, as though the possibilities ahead of her were endless. Thank you for joining us on this journey of transformation and healing. If you've enjoyed Sarah's story, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more emotional and inspiring stories that will touch your heart. Every week, we share powerful narratives that remind us of the strength we all have inside. Don't miss out on the next chapter. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and be part of this incredible journey with us. We're excited to have you along as we explore more stories of resilience, love, and new beginnings. See you next time.